Before we begin, I want you to notice something simple. You are not living your life. You are living your assumptions about life. Every decision you make, every risk you avoid, every chance you take or lose, is shaped not by logic, but by the invisible shortcuts your mind built years ago. You don't see reality. You see your interpretation of it. And the mind doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It only asks, "Does this feel familiar?" That is why intelligent people repeat the same mistakes. That is why confidence appears without competence. That is why we think we are in control, when we rarely are. This book is not about intelligence. It is about seeing the machinery behind thought itself. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1: The Invisible Mind. You believe you are looking at the world, but you are not. You are looking at a story your mind is stitching together in real time. Imagine this for a moment. A group of volunteers are shown a video. Two basketball teams passing a ball back and forth. They're given a simple instruction. Count how many times the white team passes the ball. They focus, they concentrate. They count every pass with full attention. And then halfway through the clip, a person in a gorilla suit slowly walks into the frame, stops, beats its chest, and walks out. Almost half of the viewers never notice the gorilla. They don't even see it. Not because their eyes are closed, but because their mind is. You like to believe you are seeing reality, but you are only seeing what your mind lets you notice. Everything else, even something as absurd as a gorilla, gets edited out silently, invisibly. Your eyes receive data, but your mind decides what counts as reality. This is the first crack in the illusion. You are not living in the world. You are living in a filtered model of it. A model built by shortcuts, guesses, and instincts. Most of your life, you don't think. You autocomplete. And the part of your mind doing this works faster than you can realize. Scientists call it System 1. Your fast brain. The automatic pilot. The storyteller that responds before you're even aware a story exists. It is fast. It is confident. And most of the time, it is wrong. Chapter 1 leaves you with one question. If the mind can miss something as obvious as a gorilla, what else has it been hiding from you? In the next chapter, you'll enter the world of System 1. The fast brain. The invisible puppeteer behind most of your choices. Chapter 2, System 1. The fast brain. System 1 is the part of you that speaks before you realize you have spoken. It reacts before you reflect. It judges before you understand. It decides before you even know a decision was made. You experience it every day. You glance at a stranger and instantly feel trustworthy or don't trust him. You hear a sound behind you at night, and your body tenses before you consciously think danger. You see a facial expression and instantly feel what it might mean. Anger, approval, disgust, without calculating anything. That is System 1. Fast, intuitive, automatic. A survival machine designed for speed, not accuracy. Your ancestors needed it. When a rustle in the bushes might be a predator. Thinking slowly meant dying quickly. So nature built a shortcut. Instant reaction, perfect reasoning. But here is the problem. You still carry an ancient survival brain. Inside a modern world of complexity, you react with instincts to situations that require analysis. You trust confidence instead of competence. You choose familiarity instead of truth. You confuse ease with certainty. When something feels right, Your fast brain treats it as true, whether it is or not. And this is where most mistakes are born. System 1 uses mental shortcuts called heuristics. They save time, but they distort reality. It fills blanks. It invents explanations. It gives you conclusions first and lets you justify them later. You don't notice this happening because System 1 does not ask for permission. It speaks in feelings, not logic. A good vibe, a bad sign, a gut instinct, a he looks honest. It was never designed to tell the truth. It was designed to keep you alive. In the next chapter, you will meet its counterpart, the slower, heavier, deliberate part of your mind. The part you believe is in control, but rarely is. System 2, the slow brain. The thinker that arrives after the reaction. Chapter 3, System 2, the slow brain. System 2 is the part of you that believes it is in charge. It is the thinker, the analyzer, the voice that says, "Let me understand this properly." But here is the truth. Most people never realize. System 2 is lazy by default. It wakes up only when it is forced to. It doesn't want to work unless absolutely necessary. It would rather trust System 1 than challenge it. When you solve a math problem, when you question your assumptions, when you notice your own bias, that is System 2 finally waking up. But System 2 is slow, effortful, energy-consuming, and your brain is built to conserve energy, which means most of the time, it doesn't use it. This is why people judge first, and reason second, why they believe first, and verify later, why they say, "I feel like this is true," instead of "I know this is true." System 1 wants comfort. System 2 demands work. And so, most people go through life, not thinking, but rationalizing. Here is the most uncomfortable insight. Your fast brain decides. Your slow brain explains. Choice first, justification second. You do not think to reach conclusions. You think to protect the conclusions your fast brain already made. This is why intelligent people still make foolish mistakes. Their intelligence does not prevent bias. It only makes their justifications more sophisticated. They don't outsmart System 1. They defend it. Understanding System 2 is understanding that clarity takes effort, and that effort requires awareness. Awareness is the gateway to self-correction, but you cannot correct what you cannot see. In the next chapter, you'll discover what happens when these two minds, fast and slow, collide, when instinct battles logic, when confidence replaces truth, when your brain chooses speed over reality. This collision creates the most famous traps of human thinking. Cognitive biases. Chapter 4, Cognitive Ease. When your mind prefers the story over the truth. Your mind is not searching for truth. It is searching for comfort. And comfort lives in familiar stories, not in difficult facts. This is the bias of cognitive ease. Your brain prefers what feels easy to believe over what is accurate. Think about it. A simple lie is often more believable than a complicated truth. A confident voice sounds more trustworthy than an expert who speaks with caution. A repeated statement feels more true than a correct statement said once. System 1 does not check evidence. It checks effort. If something is easy to process, it feels true. If something is mentally heavy, It feels doubtful. This is why propaganda works. This is why rumors spread. This is why marketing trains your instincts instead of your reasoning. Familiarity becomes truth. Repetition becomes reality. You don't analyze. You absorb. Your fast brain has a rule. If it feels smooth, it must be right. If it takes effort, it must be wrong. And so, your mind silently builds a cage. Out of convenience. Not a prison made of bars, but a prison made of ease. This is the first collision between System 1 and System 2. System 1 says, this sounds right. System 2 should ask, is it actually right? But System 2 is lazy. So it agrees. And the illusion becomes belief. Belief becomes memory. Memory becomes identity. Identity becomes ego. A simple idea grows into a worldview without ever passing through verification. This is why Kahneman says, nothing in life is as important as you think it is. While you are thinking about it, thinking magnifies. Emotion authenticates. Your mind does not look for accuracy. It looks for coherence. A satisfying lie feels safer than a complex truth. In the next chapter, you will see how your brain doesn't just prefer stories. It creates them, even when the facts are incomplete, even when the data is missing, even when reality is unknown. The next bias is the narrative fallacy, where your mind becomes a storyteller instead of an investigator. Chapter 5, the narrative fallacy, your mind the storyteller. Your mind was never designed to live with uncertainty. It is uncomfortable with, I don't know. So it replaces uncertainty with a story, not because the story is true, but because the absence of a story feels unsafe. This is called the narrative fallacy, the brain's compulsive need to turn events into a clean, logical explanation, even when no explanation exists. When something happens, you don't ask, what is the evidence? You first ask, unconsciously, what story can make this feel meaningful? Randomness is terrifying, so your brain hides it behind reason, even a false one. Think about the last time something good happened to you. Did you say, I was lucky? Or did you create a cause? I worked hard. I made the right choice. It happened for a reason. Your mind stitches a pattern, so you feel in control. You don't want reality. You want predictability. The same thing happens when life goes wrong. You don't say, it was random. You say, I always mess things up. People are like this. This always happens to me. From a single event. Your mind writes a story about yourself. Not because it's true, but because it feels complete. Here is the trap. Once System 1 creates a story, System 2 stops looking for truth. The moment a narrative exists, investigation ends. That is how illusions turn into belief. You think you understand your past, but mostly, you are just narrating it. You think you know why people act the way they do, but mostly, you are projecting motives your mind invented. And yet, the story feels real, so it becomes real in your decisions. This is why Kahneman warns. What you see is all there is. The brain assumes that the visible part of the story is the whole truth. It never stops to ask, what am I not seeing? In the next chapter, you'll meet the most dangerous result of this storytelling brain when confidence replaces knowledge, when instincts wear the mask of certainty. The next bias is the illusion of understanding. Where your brain mistakes, I can explain it, for I actually know it. Chapter 6. The illusion of understanding. Your mind hates the feeling of, I don't know. So the moment a story seems to fit, you don't just accept it. You start believing you understand it. Not because the understanding is real, but because the feeling of clarity arrived. This is called the illusion of understanding. The belief that if something makes sense in your head, it must also be true in reality. You see a successful person, and your mind instantly builds a story. He must be confident. He must have planned everything. He must have known what he was doing. But if you lift the curtain, you often find confusion, accidents, uncertainty, and random timing. Success looks logical only in hindsight. After something happens, you tell yourself, it was obvious. I knew it. I could have predicted it. But before it happened, you had no idea. This is why the world feels more understandable than it actually is. You don't understand events. You reconstruct them into a clean explanation. After the fact, this is not knowledge. This is retrospective storytelling. And because the story feels neat, your mind says, yes, this is truth. But look closely. If you truly understood success, you could replicate it. If you truly understood failure, you could avoid it. Yet most people repeat the same emotional mistakes again and again because they never understood. They only explained. Your brain is not searching for accuracy. It is searching for comfort disguised as clarity. This is why people feel certain without ever being correct. This is how confidence pretends to be wisdom. And this is how the mind silently replaces reality with a convincing illusion. In the next chapter, we go deeper into confidence, into how your mind not only believes, it understands things, but also begins to believe it can predict them. The next bias is the illusion of control. When your brain thinks it is steering the future, while it is barely holding the wheel. Chapter 7. The illusion of control. Your mind does not only want to understand reality, it wants to control it. Not because you actually can, but because the feeling of control is psychological shelter. When life feels uncertain, your brain manufactures a subtle lie. I can influence this. This is in my hands. Even when it is. The illusion of control is the belief that your choices are steering outcomes, when in reality, you are only steering your expectations. You feel like a driver, but most of the time, you are a passenger holding a fake steering wheel. Casinos are built on this illusion. So are bad investments. So are most life plans. People throw dice harder to get a bigger number, as if the universe listens to intention. They don't want randomness, so their brain injects meaning into chance. You don't control markets. You don't control timing. You don't control luck. But your brain refuses to admit this, because helplessness is unbearable. So it replaces helplessness with false mastery. You start thinking outcomes reflect your planning, your mindset, your strategy, your manifestation, when most of it is variance, variables you never saw, forces you never touched. This is why confidence feels so real, even when it is disconnected from skill. People don't get addicted to success. They get addicted to the illusion that they caused it. Real intelligence is not control. Real intelligence is recognizing what you never controlled to begin with. Because the moment you see what is truly in your hands, and what never was, you stop wasting energy against the wind, and start steering only where steering is real. That is the doorway. From ego to clarity. In the next chapter, we go deeper into how this illusion fuels overconfidence, the mental trap where a strong feeling is mistaken for high probability. Chapter 8, The Confidence Trap. Confidence is seductive, not because it is accurate, but because it feels safe. Your mind does not measure truth. It measures certainty, and then mistakes that certainty for truth. This is the confidence trap. The more sure you feel, the less you question what you're actually basing that certainty on. You've seen it everywhere. People speak with absolute conviction about things they barely understand. Why? Because confidence is not a product of knowledge. It is a product of coherence. If a story sounds smooth inside your mind, you feel confident repeating it, even if it's completely wrong. The brain does not reward correctness. It rewards internal comfort. This is why amateurs are overconfident. Experts are cautious. The ignorant are loud. The wise are measured. When you know little, everything looks simple. When you know more, complexity reveals itself, and certainty becomes humility. The danger isn't being wrong. The danger is being wrong with confidence. Because once confidence solidifies, your mind stops updating. It stops observing. It stops learning. You don't improve truth. You defend your illusion. Overconfidence turns perspective into a prison. Your mind locks the door and hands you the key made of ego. The illusion feels empowering until reality arrives, cold and indifferent. So Kahneman teaches, real wisdom is not believing you are right, but staying awake to the possibility that you might be wrong. True intelligence is not certainty. It is flexibility. Awareness that your brain is not a narrator of reality, but a narrator of stories. In the next chapter, we go deeper into how the brain protects its illusions, even when evidence is against it. Chapter 9, The Halo Effect. Your mind does not judge people. It completes them. The moment you notice one positive trait, your brain fills in all the missing details with more positivity. This is the halo effect, a bias where a single good impression creates an entire false identity. You don't see the person. You see the glow around them. If someone is attractive, your brain quietly assumes they must also be kind, confident, intelligent, trustworthy. None of this is known, but it feels true. A beautiful face becomes a beautiful character. A polished speaker becomes a competent leader. A wealthy person becomes a wise person. Appearance becomes virtue, and the illusion feels natural. The halo effect isn't admiration. It is blind completion. Your brain hates empty spaces, so it fills them with assumptions, positive ones, because positivity keeps social friction low. You don't actually evaluate people. You predict who they are based on fragments. This is why first impressions feel final. Not because they are accurate, but because they are sticky. Once a halo forms, you stop noticing contradictions. You filter reality. To protect the glow, you don't observe the person. You preserve the illusion. The reverse is also true. The horns effect, where one negative trait poisons the entire perception of a person. One mistake, entire character judged. One flaw, total dismissal. Your mind does not want to know someone. It wants to simplify them. The halo effect explains why. Charisma is mistaken for competence. Confidence is mistaken for intelligence. Fame is mistaken for credibility. Appearance is mistaken for character. It is not people you respond to. It is your story of them. In the next chapter, we go into a deeper trap. When your brain doesn't just complete someone, it anchors your entire judgment to the very first piece of information you saw. Chapter 10, Anchoring. Your mind wants a starting point before forming any judgment. And the first number, first idea, or first impression you encounter becomes that anchor, even if it is random, irrelevant, or misleading. This is anchoring. Your brain unconsciously clings to the first reference it receives, and all later thinking bends around it. If the first price you hear for a product is $50,000, a price of $35,000 feels cheap. But if the first price you hear is $10,000, $35,000 suddenly feels expensive. The product never changed. Your anchor did. You don't evaluate reality. You compare it to the first number your mind latched onto. This is why negotiations start high. Why original price tags exist. Why luxury branding works. Why discounts feel emotional. Anchoring manipulates your sense of fairness before you even think. And it's not just numbers. People get anchored to first impressions, first assumptions, first judgments, first rumors, first labels. The more unfamiliar the situation, the heavier the anchor. When your mind feels unsure, it clings harder. Anchoring is powerful not because it controls your choice, but because it controls your baseline. It decides what feels normal, reasonable, expected. And once normal is defined, you stop questioning whether the baseline was false. This is the trap Kahneman exposes. The first exposure becomes the frame, and the frame becomes the truth. Your confidence doesn't come from analysis. It comes from the anchor your brain refuses to let go of. In the next chapter, we explore how the mind builds entire beliefs, not from facts, but from availability. What is easiest to recall becomes what feels most true. The next bias, the availability heuristic, when memory replaces reality. Chapter 11, the availability heuristic. Your mind does not search for truth first. It searches for what is easiest to remember. And whatever comes to mind quickly feels true. This is the availability heuristic, the bias where your brain confuses what is vivid with what is real. If a story is emotionally charged, if it shocked you, or scared you, or impressed you, your mind makes it instantly available. So later, when you judge a situation, you don't rely on statistics or probability. You rely on what memory screams the loudest. This is why people think plane crashes are common, but they're rare. Why people fear sharks, but not cars. Why the news makes the world look dangerous, even when data shows the opposite. Your brain mistakes recall frequency for real frequency. The more something is repeated or dramatic, the more true it feels. This bias also shapes your self-beliefs. If your mind often recalls failure's right arrow, you believe you're unlucky. If it recalls rejection, you believe you're unwanted. if it recalls moments you hesitated. You believe you are not ready, not because that is your identity, but because those memories are easier to replay. Your identity is not formed by experiences. It is formed by the experiences you remember most often. The mind is not a historian. It is a highlight editor, saving only what was intense enough to leave a mark. Calm truths disappear. Loud moments dominate. In the next chapter, we go deeper into this distortion, into how your brain doesn't just recall memories. It constructs stories around them, even filling gaps that never existed. Chapter 12, The Narrative Fallacy. The mind cannot stand randomness. So when events do not come with meaning, your brain creates one. This is the narrative fallacy, the bias where your mind turns scattered facts into a story that feels complete, logical, and intentional, even when reality was chaotic. Success is rarely linear, but your brain retells it, as if every step pointed forward. Failure is rarely simple, but your brain edits it into a single defining cause. You don't want truth. You want a plot. Not what actually happened, but what story can I tell so it makes sense? This is why we idolize successful people. The story always sounds perfect in hindsight. But if you zoom into their journey, you don't see certainty. You see confusion, detours, accidents, luck, timing, and survival. The story is clean. The reality was messy. The narrative fallacy protects your emotional comfort, because a story feels safer than chaos. But comfort comes with a cost. When the mind turns life into a story, you stop noticing how much was random. You mistake outcome for intention. You mistake pattern for cause. You mistake survival for design. This is why people copy routines of the rich, habits of billionaires, morning rituals of founders, as if success were a recipe. They are not studying principles. They are worshiping the story. The narrative feels true, so they believe the method must be replicable. But a clean story is not a roadmap. A clean story is just a well-edited memory. In the next chapter, we move to another illusion: how your brain stops seeing what's missing, simply because it's not visible. Chapter 13, What you see is all there is. Your mind is blind to missing information. It does not pause to ask, what am I not seeing? It simply assumes that what is visible equals the full picture. This is the bias Kahneman calls WISITI. What you see is all there is. When you see someone succeed, you don't see the failures that were hidden. When you see someone confident, you don't see the insecurity in the background. When you see someone's life from the outside, you assume you are seeing it fully. But life is mostly off camera. The mind refuses to consider the invisible half of reality. This is why mistakes feel obvious after they happen, and impossible to predict before they happen. Your brain only understands what it can see. It does not account for the things that never appeared, never surfaced, never became visible. You do not judge reality. You judge whatever survives your attention. This bias shows up in daily thinking too. You underestimate risk because you don't see the people who failed silently. You overestimate talent because you only meet the ones who succeeded publicly. You call someone lucky because you never saw the price they paid in private. The unseen is always bigger than the seen. But the mind behaves as if the seen is all that exists. WISITI explains why. Your brain trusts fragments as full truth. Your confidence rises even when your information is incomplete. You assume you are right because nothing contradicts you. You rarely think to look for what's missing. The illusion is not in what you know. The illusion is in believing there is nothing else to know. In the next chapter, we move to one of the most dangerous distortions, when the mind not only ignores missing information, but replaces it with assumptions. This next bias is the root of predictability illusions and belief-driven errors. Substitution. When the brain answers a difficult question by unconsciously swapping it with an easier one. Chapter 14, Substitution. When the brain faces a hard question, it cannot answer immediately. It does not slow down. It silently replaces the question with a simpler one and answers that instead. This is substitution. You don't notice the swap happening. You just feel confident in the answer, even though you never answered the original question. Examples. Is this startup a good long-term investment? Becomes, do I like the founder? Is this person trustworthy? Becomes, do they seem confident? Is this project worth months of commitment? Becomes, does it excite me right now? The hard question vanishes. The easy question takes its place. And you never realize a substitution happened. Your brain does this to protect momentum. Deep thinking is metabolically expensive. So instead of solving, it feels its way through. Not truth. Comfort. Not accuracy. Speed. This is why System 1 feels intuitive. It is always answering the wrong question beautifully. When you choose a leader, you don't evaluate competence. You substitute it with likability. When you judge risk, you don't measure probability. You substitute it with fear. When you make life choices, you don't analyze outcomes. You substitute them with immediate emotion. And because the substituted question is easy, the answer feels effortless, and therefore correct. The danger is not ignorance. The danger is thinking you understood, when you never even evaluated the real question. A false sense of clarity is more harmful than confusion. Confusion admits there is more to learn. Substitution convinces you there is. In the next chapter, we go deeper into why the mind clings to easy judgments, and how repetition, not truth, creates conviction. Chapter 15. The last obstacle is you. Before we go further, pause just for a moment. Take a breath, because this chapter quietly reveals the most hidden reason why people never become rich. A reason that has nothing to do with money, opportunity, timing, skill, or luck. It has to do with self-permission. You can master habits, discipline, strategy, work ethic. You can surround yourself with winners, read books, hustle every day. But if in the deepest corners of your mind you do not believe that you are allowed to win, you will always stop yourself right before the breakthrough. The last enemy is never competition. It's your own ceiling of self-worth. Rich people do not just earn more money. They feel deserving of more money. They feel comfortable with abundance the same way most people feel comfortable with survival. And this is where almost everyone unknowingly loses the game. They secretly identify with scarcity. They are loyal to their limits. Look closely at your life patterns. How many times did you slow down right after you made good progress? How often do you sabotage momentum because something suddenly distracts you? How many opportunities did you delay simply because you felt not ready yet? That wasn't lack of motivation. That was your identity protecting its old version of you. Your brain is wired to keep you consistent with who you think you are. not who you wish to become. To become wealthy, the mind must upgrade before the income does. You must stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I'm actually built for this?" You must slowly shift the question from, "Can I really do it?" to, "Why shouldn't I?" The book reminds us here that all external results, status, money, reputation, success, are reflections of an internal shift. When you no longer doubt if you belong at the top, you start walking as if you're already on your way there. Wealth is not something you chase. It's something you grow into. The final test is not skill. It's identity. So chapter 15 leaves us with a quiet but powerful truth. You don't become wealthy to feel worthy. You first must feel worthy to become wealthy. Only when your mind stops arguing with your future finally walks toward you. Chapter 16, The Turning Point. Calm, immersive slow burn transformation POV. Every journey has a moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but quietly decisive. A moment where something clicks inside you, and your life is never quite the same afterward. This is that moment. Not the moment the world notices you, but the moment you begin to notice yourself differently. The author explains that real change is not built from effort alone. Effort is fuel, but identity is direction. And once the direction becomes clear, you stop moving like someone who is trying and start moving like someone who is becoming. Before this turning point, you look for motivation. You wait for signs. You second-guess everything. After this turning point, you act from conviction, not emotion. You build instead of waiting. You stop asking if and start deciding when. People think success comes from big decisions. But no, it comes from a quiet internal pivot. From, "I hope I can do this," to, "I'm going to live as though I already can." That shift feels subtle, but it changes the future completely. Because action taken from hope is weak. Action taken from identity is unstoppable. The chapter also brings a powerful reminder. Most people don't fail due to lack of opportunity. They fail because they never fully commit. They live with one foot in the dream and one foot in the doubt, always half becoming, half moving, half alive. The turning point is the moment you finally choose, "I will not live in halves anymore." From here onward, you stop chasing potential and start embodying it. You stop waiting for later and decide that your future starts now. Not once you feel ready, not once circumstances improve, not once people approve. Now, because wealth, success, power, they don't arrive after you become confident. They arrive because you start living like someone who expects them. This is the doorway. After this, your life stops being preparation and starts becoming execution. The mindset is the breakthrough. The results are just the aftermath. Chapter 17, The Enemy Within. A low, slow ambient swell, like distant thunder buried under silence. The most dangerous obstacles in your life are not outside you. They are the ones inside your own head. Not fear itself, but the voice that fear uses. Not failure, but the story you attach to it. Not judgment from others, but the assumptions you make before anyone speaks. This is the enemy within, the unseen force that limits your life without ever touching it. Soft, reflective breath. Watch how it works. When you want to begin something meaningful, the voice whispers, "Not yet. You're not ready. What if it goes wrong? What will they think?" It never says stop. It only says later, because later is the prettiest form of self-burial. Deeper pause, voice turns inward. This inner enemy doesn't destroy you through force. It destroys you through delay. It keeps you overthinking, so you never start. It offers comfort, so you never grow. It feeds your doubt, so your potential starves quietly. You don't lose the war. You never even enter it. Calm but heavier. The author explains, the mind does not fear failure. The mind fears identity change. Because if you try and succeed, you will no longer be who you were. If you try and fail, you will have to confront what is real. So the enemy within convinces you that avoiding the attempt is safer than confronting the truth. Quiet cinematic rise like light cutting through fog. But here is the deeper truth. You are not stuck because you are incapable. You are stuck because you are still negotiating with the version of you that does not want to evolve. The old identity still fights for survival. And every time you hesitate, you feed it. The turning point is not killing the enemy. It is recognizing it. Because once you see the voice for what it is, you stop mistaking it for your truth. You stop obeying it, and it begins to lose power. You don't silence the enemy by arguing with it. You silence it by outgrowing it. Soft exhale, slow, calm outro. In the next chapter, we explore how people unknowingly shrink themselves to stay acceptable. Chapter 18, The Trap of Social Proof. Soft ambient hum, like standing alone in a quiet room where the world feels distant. Human beings don't fear being wrong as much as they fear being alone. This is why, before you trust your own judgment, you look sideways. You look at others, not because they are right, but because they are many. Your brain whispers, if everyone else is doing it, it must be safe. If no one else is doing it, maybe I shouldn't either. This is social proof, a shortcut your mind uses to avoid the discomfort of independent thinking. Slow pause, reflective. But here is the danger. The crowd is rarely following truth. The crowd follows comfort. The crowd doesn't choose what is best. It chooses what feels easiest to explain. And so, without realizing it, you trade your potential for approval. You don't live. You conform. Deeper, slower tone. Think about it. How many dreams died? Not because they were impossible, but because they were unpopular. How many times did you shrink? Just enough to stay acceptable. How many times did you delay your growth? Because nobody else around you was growing. The crowd doesn't need to stop you. You stop yourself, just to stay close to them. Soft swell. This is why the book says, the easiest way to control a person is not by limiting their freedom, but by limiting their imagination of what is possible. When you see no one around you dream big, your brain assumes it must be unrealistic. Not because it is, but because it is uncommon. Calm silence, then gentle shift. Here is the turning point. When you stop asking, is anyone else doing this? And start asking, is this aligned with me? That is the moment you separate from the herd and begin walking forward. Greatness always begins in isolation. Chapter 19, The Prison of Identity. A soft, dim atmospheric bed, like standing in a quiet hallway of mirrors. You don't live life as it is. You live life as you believe you are. Before the world limits you, Your self-image does. Your brain quietly says, I am this type of person. This is what I can do. This is what someone like me is allowed to have. And everything outside that identity starts to feel unreachable. Not because it is, but because it doesn't match who you think you are. Slow, reflective tone. People don't sabotage their goals because they are lazy. They sabotage them because their identity is still tied to the past. The mind would rather stay consistent with an old version of you than allow a new, truer version to exist. That is why change feels like loss before it feels like growth. Deepening bass, gentle but heavy. The author shows a truth we rarely see. Your brain protects your identity more fiercely than it protects your success. That is why discipline feels painful. Not because the action is hard, but because the action threatens who you have been. You're not fighting habits. You're fighting self-definition. Pause, voice softens. Look closely. If you secretly believe, I'm not the kind of person who succeeds, then every opportunity will feel like a mismatch between your dream and your identity, and your mind will unconsciously sabotage it just to stay familiar. Better the cage you know than the freedom you have to grow into. Soft rising hope, like a window opening. You do not outgrow an old identity by force. You outgrow it by no longer feeding it. Every small courageous action is a vote for a new self, a new story, a new internal permission. The moment you stop defending who you used to be, you begin becoming who you actually are. Gentle outro, still centered. In the next chapter, we move into a deeper layer. How the mind protects ego more than truth, and how people would rather feel right than become wise. Chapter 20, the need to be right. Soft ambient tone, like a slow inhale before truth lands. Your mind does not search for truth first. It searches for protection first. Not protection of your body, but protection of your ego. Because if you are wrong, you must change. And change threatens identity. So the mind builds a shield, a deep psychological need to be right, even when wrongness is obvious. Quiet, reflective pause. Notice how quickly this happens. You don't look for evidence. You look for confirmation. You don't ask, is this true? You ask, does this support what I already believe? This is not thinking. This is self-defense disguised as logic. Tone drops lower, slower. The book explains. The mind prefers a comforting lie over a disruptive truth. Truth forces growth. Truth demands self-correction. Truth exposes blind spots. And ego hates exposure. So your brain bends reality just enough to keep your current beliefs safe. Soft cinematic swell, like peeling a mask. This is why arguments rarely change people. Because people are not defending their viewpoint. They are defending their identity attached to the viewpoint. You can't teach someone who is busy protecting themselves. And sometimes, that someone is you. Gentle, quiet, soft focus inward. When you need to be right, you stop evolving. When you allow yourself to be corrected, you start expanding. Humility is not weakness. Humility is open bandwidth for growth. The moment you choose truth over ego, wisdom begins. Chapter 21, when feelings pretend to be facts. Soft, slow, atmospheric bed, like rain tapping against a quiet window. Your mind does not experience reality directly. It experiences a story about reality, filtered through emotion. When something feels true, your brain labels it as true, even without evidence. This is called emotional reasoning. The belief that, because you feel something strongly, it must reflect reality. Gentle pause, introspective. You don't ask, is this real? You ask, does this feeling match my belief? And once the feeling fits the belief, logic shuts off. The emotion becomes the verdict. Deeper, slower tone. Think of how often this happens. You feel insecure, so you assume others are judging you. You feel unprepared, right arrow, so you assume you will fail. You feel left behind, right arrow, so you assume everyone else is ahead of you. The feeling becomes proof, not because reality said so, but because emotion declared it. Soft cinematic swell. The author reveals something subtle and powerful. Emotion does not consult truth before declaring certainty. That is why people defend beliefs that harm them, relationships that drain them, dreams they never truly chose, and limitations that were never real. They aren't defending logic. They are defending the emotional world they live in. Gentle, reflective silence. This is why growth is uncomfortable. To change your life, you must first question the truth of your feelings. Not all feelings lie, but many feelings are echoes of old wounds, not signals from the present moment. Soft hope entering the tone. Emotional maturity begins when you stop asking, do I feel it? And start asking, is it real? That shift is the beginning of psychological freedom. Chapter 22, The Brain's False Alarms. Low ambient hum, like distant static dissolving into quiet awareness. Your brain was not designed for success. It was designed for survival. And survival does not ask, is this opportunity real? It only asks, is this safe? That is why your first reaction to growth is almost always fear, doubt, or hesitation. Not because something is dangerous, but because it is different. Soft reflective pause. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between threat and discomfort. So the moment you step toward change, toward improvement, toward a version of yourself you have never been before, your mind fires a false alarm. It feels like, this is risky. What if I fail? Better not try. But beneath the words is a simpler message. Stay the same. Tone deepens, quiet but heavy. The book explains, the brain treats the unknown as a potential predator, even when the unknown is your future self. So you're not actually afraid of the goal. You're afraid of the identity shift required to reach it. Slow cinematic swell, awakening tone. This is why procrastination feels like relief. It turns off the false alarm. Not because you made a wise choice, but because you retreated to the familiar. The mind rewards familiarity, like it rewards survival, even when the familiar is mediocrity. Soft breath, stillness. Growth begins the moment you stop interpreting discomfort as danger and start recognizing it as transition. The fear is not a signal to stop. It's a sign that you are crossing from the known into the possible. Chapter 23, Comfort, the Silent Ceiling. Soft, low atmospheric pad, like the slow fading echo of footsteps in a large, quiet space. Comfort does not feel like a trap. That is why it is one. There is no pain, no visible barrier, no loud warning that you are stuck. Comfort hides your limits by making you feel okay instead of alive. Slow reflective pause. The mind will choose a familiar misery over an unfamiliar possibility every time, unless you consciously interrupt it. You don't feel imprisoned. You feel stable. You don't feel stuck. You feel not in danger. Comfort does not slow your life instantly. It slows it gradually. So slowly, you don't notice the ceiling lowering above you. Tone deepens calm gravity. The author explains, people don't stay small because they lack ambition. They stay small because they fear friction. Growth is friction. Evolution is friction. Identity shift is friction. Comfort convinces you that friction is a sign to step back, when in truth, it is a sign that you are entering a new level. Soft swell like a horizon widening. The real cost of comfort is not what you feel. It is what you never become. Comfort quietly trades your future for your present. It does not steal your life. It delays it until momentum is gone and courage feels too expensive to access. Voice softens reflective. This is why change often begins, not with inspiration, but with disgust. The moment when this is fine finally collapses into, this is not who I want to remain. That moment is the first crack in the ceiling. Chapter 24, The Psychology of Resistance. Soft atmospheric undercurrent, like tension in stillness. You don't resist the goal. You resist the internal shift required to reach it. Because growth is not just improvement. It is identity death. The old version of you cannot come with you to the next level. And the mind mourns even unhealthy identities because they are familiar. Slow, heavy pause. Resistance is not laziness. Resistance is fear wearing logic. It sounds like, not yet. I'll start when I'm ready. I need a perfect plan first. This isn't the right time. All of these feel rational, but they are emotional shielding. Deepening tone. The book explains, the mind will invent intelligent excuses to avoid uncomfortable evolution. So resistance doesn't feel like obstruction. It feels like reasonableness. But look at the result. You don't move forward. You wait. You postpone. You hold back. You live paused. Soft cinematic swell, clarity emerging. The brain is trying to preserve who you have been instead of allowing who you are becoming. The question is not, why am I not taking action? The real question is, what identity is my mind trying to protect? Because every resistance is a self-protection mechanism, not from danger, but from transformation. Voice softens introspective. Once you see resistance clearly, its power dissolves. You realize there was never a wall, only a self-image too small to walk through the door. Awareness is the first break in the armor. Chapter 25, When Fear Disguises Itself as Realism. Soft, low ambience like clouds dimming sunlight slowly. Most people don't say, I'm scared. They say, I'm just being realistic. But realism is rarely neutral. Most of the time, realistic is simply fear wearing a suit. Quiet, reflective pause. You call it practical because calling it fear would force honesty. You call it logic because calling it avoidance would expose the cost. The mind protects comfort with elegant vocabulary. It doesn't say, I'm afraid to fail. It says, "This probably won't work." Tone deepens, slow and honest. The book explains, people rarely defend truth. They defend their threshold for discomfort. When someone says, "I'm being realistic," they're often saying, "I don't want to expand," not because they can't, but because expanding would require becoming someone new, and they are still attached to who they have been. Soft swell awareness opening. Realism becomes a prison when it measures possibility only through past identity. Because if you only believe what you've already experienced, you are forcing your future to repeat your past. That isn't realism. That is self-imposed repetition. Gentle introspective tone. Real growth begins when you ask, is this truly impossible? Or just emotionally expensive? Because most impossible things are simply things you've never been brave enough to attempt yet. Chapter 26, Narrative as Self-Protection. Soft meditative background, like slow-moving water in a quiet room. The human mind doesn't protect you. It protects the story you believe about yourself. This is why change feels threatening. Growth doesn't just challenge your habits. It challenges your identity script. And the script fights back. Slow reflective pause. When something feels out of character, you don't reject the action. You reject yourself in that role. You say, "I'm not that kind of person. That's not really me. I don't think that's who I am." But those aren't facts. They're identity boundaries masquerading as truth. Tone deepens, calm certainty. The book explains, before you fail at the action, your mind convinces you. You are not the type of person who even attempts it. That's not logic. That's self-preservation of the old identity. If you never try, you never threaten the story. Soft swell awareness widening. Your brain isn't stopping you from doing something hard. It's stopping you from becoming someone you haven't been yet. You're not avoiding risk. You're avoiding identity evolution. This is why some people stay stuck, even when they know what to do. Knowledge isn't the barrier. Identity is. Voice softens, intimate clarity. You don't need more information. You need a new self-definition. The question shifts from, what should I do? To, who am I willing to become? Because once your identity shifts, action becomes effortless, not forced. You move differently because you are different. Chapter 27, The Slow Mind Finally Speaks. Your fast mind reacts, but your slow mind evaluates. Most people never hear the slow mind, not because it is weak, but because it is buried under noise. Noise from urgency, noise from habit, noise from autopilot. System 1 rushes in with answers. Quick, certain, confident. It hates hesitation, because hesitation makes space for truth. System 2, the slow mind, is different. It does not rush. It watches. It questions the rush. It interrupts the illusion. It asks, is this actually real? Or just familiar? The moment System 2 wakes up, the illusion cracks. Your beliefs stop feeling like facts. Your instincts stop feeling like destiny. Your reactions stop feeling like you. Because now there is distance. A watcher observing the mind, instead of drowning inside it. This is the beginning of metacognition, the rare ability to think about your thinking. Animals react. Humans narrate. But only a few humans audit the narration. And this is where your life actually changes. Not when new information enters your mind, but when a new observer enters your awareness. You don't overcome biases through willpower. You overcome them through visibility. You cannot defeat a shadow until you shine a light on what casts it. In this chapter, you didn't learn anything new. You noticed something old. There are two of you, the one who reacts and the one who chooses. Most people live as the first. Growth begins when you shift into the second. In the next chapter, you'll see what happens when the slow mind doesn't just wake up, but begins to take control. This is where reasoning replaces reflex, and intelligence finally becomes choice instead of accident. Chapter 28, when thinking becomes effort. Waking up the slow mind feels good, but using it feels heavy. This is why most people, even intelligent people, avoid real thinking. Not because they lack ability, but because thinking is work. Notice this inside you. When you solve a puzzle, when you learn something unfamiliar, when you resist a first instinct and actually examine it, you feel friction. That friction is the cost of System 2. Reflection consumes more energy than reaction. Patience burns more fuel than impulse. Understanding asks for effort, long after certainty has already shown up. So your brain quietly negotiates with itself. Why think deeply when a quick answer already feels right? And in that quiet transaction, clarity loses to comfort. This is why people stay average, even with access to infinite information. Not because they don't know, but because they don't think. Information is cheap. Attention is expensive. Real thinking is rare. Every breakthrough, personal, scientific, or psychological, comes from a moment where someone chose to keep thinking past where others stop. Where instinct would have ended the story, analysis reopened it. And that is the secret most never realize. Mediocrity is automatic. Excellence is intentional. You are not born brilliant. You become brilliant by staying with a thought longer than the average mind can tolerate. System 1 protects your energy. System 2 invests it. One shields you from discomfort. The other leads you through it. This is why mastery feels hard. Because it is hard. Not externally, but internally. In the next chapter, we go deeper into the cost of thinking. Not just energy, but ego. Because once the slow mind wakes up, it begins exposing illusions the fast mind was emotionally attached to. Chapter 29, the ego versus reality. When the slow mind begins to take control, the first resistance you meet is not ignorance. It is your ego. The ego does not protect truth. It protects identity. If a belief makes you feel safe, your mind will defend it, even when it is destroying you. If a story makes you feel right, you will cling to it, even when it keeps you stuck. The ego's rule is simple. Better a comfortable lie than a painful correction. This is why people double down on mistakes instead of course correcting. Not because they don't see the problem, but because admitting it means confronting a version of themselves they don't want to face. When you say, "I already know," you close the door to growth. When you say, "Maybe I'm wrong," you open a portal to evolution. Your slow mind is not just a tool for logic. It is a mirror. And the first thing it reflects back is not the world, but you, your patterns, your blind spots, your self-deception. This is why awareness feels sharp, almost like a cut, because the ego is being peeled away. Growth is not becoming more. It is removing what is false inside you. Ego says, I have to protect my image. Truth says, your image is the cage. The moment you become willing to look at reality as it is, not as you wish it to be, you stop reacting like a character and start acting like a creator. In the next chapter, we go beyond identity and into something even deeper. Why the mind prefers illusion over evidence, and why the truth often arrives after the moment you needed it. Chapter 30, Reality has a delay. The mind expects truth to reveal itself immediately. But reality doesn't work on your timeline. It reveals itself slowly, only after consequences accumulate. When you make a bad decision, it rarely hurts instantly. It hurts later. When you ignore a red flag, the cost doesn't show up at the beginning. It arrives at the ending. This is why illusion feels safe. It has no early penalty. Truth arrives with delay. Your fast mind judges by the moment. Your slow mind judges by the outcome. But because outcomes come late, the fast mind creates fiction in the meantime, a comforting explanation to fill the gap, while reality is still on its way. That's how people stay wrong for years, while feeling right the entire time. They are not living in truth. They are living in the delay before truth. Think about it. Pushpin, a habit, feels harmless until it becomes identity. Pushpin, a small ignorance, feels irrelevant until it becomes limitation. Pushpin, a wrong assumption, feels logical until the proof arrives. By the time reality finally shows up, the illusion has already built a home in your mind. This is why wisdom feels like seeing ahead, while everyone else sees backward. Most people wake up after the consequence. The thinking person wakes up before it. They don't need life to crash before understanding the pattern. They see the ending inside the beginning. That is the power of the slow mind. Prediction without illusion. Clarity without hindsight. Understanding before regret. In the next chapter, the final one in this series, we bring everything together. System 1, System 2. Ego, illusion, prediction, awareness. And we return to the original question. If the mind is unreliable, how do you live wisely despite it? Chapter 31, Seeing Reality Clearly. The slow mind is not about thinking harder. It is about seeing cleaner. Wisdom is not intensity. It is clarity. The more clearly you see reality, the fewer mistakes you need to make. To understand it, System 1 reacts. System 2 reflects. And between those two, your life is decided. Most people never pause long enough to notice who inside them is actually making the choice. They don't see reality. They see momentum. They don't live consciously. They live on mental autopilot. But once you begin to see your mind, not as you, but as a tool with its own biases, awareness becomes the steering wheel. Seeing clearly means you question the first interpretation. You tolerate uncertainty instead of rushing to a story. You choose correction over ego. You trade speed for accuracy when it matters. Awareness turns your life from reaction into navigation. And this is the quiet truth. The world does not reward fast minds. It rewards accurate ones. Attention becomes power. Reflection becomes leverage. Self-awareness becomes intelligence. When you learn to see clearly, you are no longer manipulated by noise, or fooled by confidence, or trapped by illusions that once felt like truth. You stop surviving your mind and start using it. This was never a book about thinking more. It was a book about thinking differently, about stepping out of the reflexive mind and into the reflective one. Because once you learn to notice your thoughts, instead of being ruled by them, you don't just understand the world more clearly. You understand yourself. And that, quietly but profoundly, changes everything. Outro. If you reach this far, you've already done something most people never do. You slowed down. In a world that only knows how to rush. You didn't just consume a summary. You practiced awareness. Because the real value of this book is not information, but transformation. When you understand how your mind works, you stop fighting life blindly, and you start steering it deliberately. If this journey helped you see yourself more clearly, then keep going. Learn deeper. Question slower. Notice earlier. And if you want more summaries like this, not rushed, not shallow, but told in a way that you can feel, not just hear, then subscribe. You are not just here to think fast. You are here to think consciously. Welcome to the slow mind. If this summary made you curious about the deeper lessons inside the book, the full version is worth experiencing, slowly page by page, because some ideas are not meant to be heard once. They are meant to be returned to whenever your mind drifts back into autopilot. I've placed the link below to the original book. So if you want to study these concepts at your own pace, you can get it directly, not as a purchase, but as a continuation of awareness. Read it the way it was meant to be read. Unhurried, reflective, like a conversation with your own mind.